Good evening, everyone. Author R. Weir, Randy here. Hopefully, everybody's having a good day. We have a little computer problems today, and I was struggling with my computer, unfortunately. Good old Chrome is giving me fits for whatever for the last week. So I keep getting updates from them, and I keep thinking it's fixed, and it's not. So I will blame Google, but pretty much got started on time, but we'll get going here. I'm going to bring my guest up here, and we're going to throw him up on the screen. And we've got author Pat Daly joining us this evening. Hi, Pat. How's it going?
Hey, Randy, things going pretty well. Happy to be here. Appreciate being on your show.
Yeah, it was good to have you here. We love it when technology works, and when it doesn't work, it aggravates us. And I worked in the IT world for years and always dealt with all this stuff. And yeah, how has your experience been with technology in your lifetime? We'll start off with a weird question there.
Well, it's. I think, like everybody, it's a little hit and miss. When things work well, it's wonderful. When things aren't working well, it's the most aggravating thing in your entire life. Something as simple as a thermostat is now potentially confounding because you can't just go up to it and twist a little knob. No, you've got to find the app, you got to open the app, you have to remember your password. Yeah. So,
Yeah, we love it, and of course, we could talk all day about the AI stuff and what all nightmares all that causes. Do you get a lot of crap through your website? People offering book clubs and all this other stuff, and like
yeah.
all the other authors I know.
Yeah, and of course, the scammers are getting better and better. And now they're impersonating real famous authors and saying,
Yes.
like, oh, hey, Brandon Sanderson here. I've come across your stuff and I really love it. And hey, hit me back and maybe we can do something together. And then, yeah, it's not really Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, the biggest tell on that I tell people, and I get I'm publishing houses and all this other, like the president of this random house was sending me, but the email is always a Gmail account, and it's like, okay, these companies have their own domains, they're huge companies, they don't use Gmail accounts. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, we got off on a tangent there, so thanks for being on the show. Give us a little information about yourself, all the important stuff people know about Pat Daly.
All right. Yeah. Born and raised in Seattle. Uh, Joined the Air Force at the tender young age of 18. And then
Did you lie about your age or were you really 18?
I was really 18. Um, Went to the Air Force Academy, learned how to fly, flew fighters. I flew as a test pilot for a number of years. Um, Along the way, I met and married my lovely wife, and we've been together now for 44 years. It's going to be in August. And we have two daughters, four grandkids, two grandsons, two granddaughters. Live in Houston, Texas now, and I still do some part-time work, but it's writing is the passion.
Mostly retired. So you went to the Air Force Academy here in Colorado Springs, as I live up in Westminster up north here.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I went to the Air Force Academy there in the Springs,
Yeah.
and then my last active duty assignment was back there teaching at the academy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the football games down there are quite a show with the flyovers and everything they do. That's always a big time event down there in Colorado Springs. So Seattle and Houston, talk about polar differences when it comes to weather and the different types of worlds. So which
Yeah.
one do you like? Which one did you like better?
Weather-wise, I like Seattle better.
Yeah.
But one of the things I learned early on is that if you marry a Texas woman, you're probably going to end up in Texas. And so my wife is from Texas, from a little town called Athens, Texas, and she's got two sisters that also live in Texas. So, we've got a fair amount of extended family right around us, and that's nice.
So are you affected by any of the floods that they've had in Texas from some of the hurricanes and stuff they've had?
Nothing recently. We Uh, my mom was living in an assisted living, well, it was independent living community there in Houston when one of the floods happened. I think we call it the tax day flood. And we had to go rescue her because the facility was in fine shape, but it had become an island. The waters were rising around it, and there wasn't much way for people to get in and out, and it looked like it was going to close off even more. So hopped in my truck and we went to rescue her and got her out of the rising water. And but other than that, a little adventure there and helping people muck out their houses afterwards. But otherwise, not really any problem.
Yeah, I remember going to Texas a long time ago in Houston there, and I went down the coast there to the beaches and stuff. But I don't think people realize how big Houston is. That's a huge town.
It is. It is. I live up on the northwest side of town, and Wednesday morning I've got an appointment in the medical center, which is pretty much a little bit south of downtown Houston. But I'm going to leave my house an hour and a half prior to the appointment to get there. It's just enormous.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you compare it to the entire state of New Hampshire, and it's about the same size.
a lot of traffic, I'm sure, too, in the highways, and it's gridlock. And I mean, we have that in Denver is a nightmare sometimes. We loved it during COVID. Nobody was on the road during COVID, so the traffic was like the streets, like, wow, we like this.
Yeah,
Other than the COVID part, it was fun. So,
yeah.
what do you enjoy doing? What's a hobby of yours? What do you do to decompress?
Well, I love puttering around the house, you know, trying to fix things, repair things. There are some things that I no longer attempt. I have been banned from attempting to texture a wall before I paint it. We've discovered that of the many gifts I think I have, that is not one of them. So, so I'm
Tim, the
banned.
tool time tailor here. You
Yeah, yeah.
washing
I'm
machines or
certainly more
anything to
Tim
require?
than, yeah, more Tim than his neighbor or what was his sidekick? Yeah, I'm certainly more Tim.
Yeah.
Um, but just working around the house, working on the fence in the yard. I love reading, and I love going for walks in nature when I can.
You have any pets that go along with you? Got dogs or anything?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We've had most of our married life. We've had two dogs, primary and emergency backup dog. Um, but we're getting to that point in life where we want to do a lot more traveling, and uh,
Yeah.
and so when one dog passed, we did not replace her, but so we promoted the emergency backup dog. He's now the primary dog, and he's great, except he's a little bit mentally unstable. We tried to take him on a road trip to go to a Big Bend National Park, and first night we get to the hotel, he won't go in the hotel room.
Wow.
There's just something about the floor that he didn't like. So I ended up having to pick him up, carry him into the room, and then we get to a different hotel just outside Big Bend, same thing. Totally different kind of floor. This one is tile, the other one was that kind of vinyl flooring. Uh, so yeah, so he's not going to be a good travel dog. So we're kind of letting him
Was
age.
the room haunted or something?
Yeah, yeah. He's. I think he just really needs a companion dog. Maybe I
Yeah.
need to get him an emotional support dog.
Well, and that I know we've had dogs that won't get on elevators either, too. They don't like that confined space
Yeah,
with
yeah,
our labs that we've had. We've had a couple like that. So sometimes you just never know. It's too bad they can't talk to us, right?
right.
Give us a little bit. You said you like to read and stuff. So, you always been a big reader? Do you remember some of the early stuff you read? Did you read when you were a youngster in school? And what kind of stuff were your go-tos?
Oh yeah, always, always a big reader, and that's one thing I absolutely appreciate that my parents did for me was give me that gift of a love of reading. Um, I remember as, well, I probably started reading the same age as everybody else, but I know that I read a lot more than my peers. I was always um, grabbing a book, and I loved the early Heinlein and Asimov stuff and Arthur C. Clarke. Always been a big sci-fi fan. Uh, and then kind of later in life, I came to enjoy murder mysteries and uh, the private eye genre. Um, and I think those are probably, and somewhere along the way, started introducing a lot of nonfiction uh, in the belief that it would help me learn more stuff. And I think it really has. So still have a fairly varied list of stuff that I read. Some historical fiction. I mean, I was a big Michener fan when he was cranking out 2,000 pages a year or however many pages those books were.
Always about the states, right?
Yeah.
The various states.
Yep.
A
Yep.
lot of history there. So, so you like to read. So when did you kind of get the writing bug? Did that come later in life, or did you always enjoy writing when you were young?
No, I hated writing when I was
Yeah.
young. Um, and and I never really wrote anything that I thought, I submitted some stuff to magazines when I was in college, uh, and I wrote some really horrible fan fiction um, in the Star Trek universe. And
Still out there somewhere where people can find them if they're looking close enough?
oh no,
No.
oh
Got those pulled down, huh?
yeah, yeah. So it took me a while to, and then you get busy doing whatever you're doing for money,
Yeah.
and for me that was not writing, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't until really the kids had left home that I started knuckling down and really. And one thing that people that aren't writers don't really understand is it's a lot of work, and you gotta show up in front of the keyboard or at your desk every day or some sort of routine discipline and bang out some pages. Uh, and so started doing that pre-COVID, and my first book came out, I think, just at the tail end of COVID, 2021, and then been pretty steady pace since then. Of course, the fact that I got laid off during COVID gave me a lot more time.
Well, yeah, if you figured out the hours that you put in when you're writing a book and the editing, and obviously when you get a book out there, there's marketing and everything else. If you're trying to figure out the per hour pay,
Yeah,
it's pretty almost a negative sometimes, unless you're really one of the really big authors who's making huge contracts, right? Especially,
right.
and so yeah, it is a lot of work. And do you find it therapeutic? Do you enjoy writing? Is that something, since you kind of came to it a little later in life, since you didn't like it younger, did you what got you to say, "Mm, yeah, I think this is something I really want to do."
Uh, it is therapeutic. For me, it's therapeutic. And one of the things that I've discovered is that if somebody in your past life has irked you, or they might find might find a character named after them, or not full name, of course, because that would be too obvious.
Right.
But yeah, and bad things can happen to that character.
It's amazing how many authors tell me that when we ask that question. So if you come up to Pat there in a store or whatever, and you cut him off in the parking lot. He finds out who you are. Maybe he might not know his name, but he may get a name, right? And the
Yep.
person shows up. So you sit there and you said, okay, I want to be a writer.
Right.
But it's like, okay, I think this is something I want to do. So, what was that first thing that you knocked out that you said, okay, I'm going to do this? Or was it a pretty long process before you felt like, this is something that people will read?
Uh, when I finished my first draft of Spark, it was 183,000 words, and that's a good sized book.
Mm-hmm.
And
It is.
um, and I
Especially
joined.
for a first book.
Yeah, yeah, and it. I joined the Houston Writers Guild because I wanted to get a little feedback on this, and God bless them, the people in my writing book in my writers group. It was a small group, just three of us. Uh, they were really good at helping me and really good at helping me cut the stuff that didn't need to be in there. And so when the final eighth draft was finished, it it was down to about 103,000 words, which is reasonable 310-ish page book. Uh, particularly more appropriate for a first time writer to get people to be willing to take a chance on it.
Well, that's a big cut down.
It was, it was, and I felt really bad. It that I had wasted so much time writing those words and that nothing came of them. And then I was reading uh, an afterword by Michael Chabon, who wrote The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay and Summerland and some other great stuff. And he threw away an entire novel once because he didn't like the voice of one of the characters and started over on it from scratch. And so I thought, okay, all right, lesson learned. If the mighty and great can suck it up and get rid of the chaff, then I ought to be able to do that too.
So what was some of the feedback that they provided you that helped you cut it down? Anything specific they said? Too many characters. Obviously, they felt it was too many words, but
Yeah,
but beyond that, too complicated of a plot. And this is a sci-fi book, right?
right, right. Yeah, science
Yeah.
fiction.
Yeah.
Um, I had too many, I think, spurious story arcs.
Hmm.
Uh, and one of the things that they said, they asked me over and over again, okay, does this serve the story? Because go back to remember what your main story arc is and the point you're trying to get the reader to at the end of the book. And if this doesn't help get them there, then get rid of it. And then they also introduced me to the concept of Chekhov's gun, where Anton Chekhov said if you introduce a gun in Act One, by the end of Act Three, that gun needs to have been used in some way, and if it's not, then it doesn't need to be in the book. And so I thought about that, and I went back and tried to be brutally honest with myself and cut stuff out.
Yeah, my editor a lot of times, and I'm on a first draft right now. And I'm going through it again and waiting for beta reader feedbacks. But she doesn't advance the story. This doesn't move the story along. I get a lot of red sometimes in the Word document and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's always good advice. And it's one of those things. Sometimes when you're writing, you don't see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And especially when uh, my first book, I didn't really plot it out. I thought I had. I'd written about a page and a half outline, and I thought that was going to be good. And then, so I ended up pantsing my way through it. A lot of seat of the pants writing, and I have a good idea or what I thought was a good idea, and I'd chase that for a while and get those words down on the screen, uh, and then later you go, what? Where was I even going with this? What? Why did I introduce this? So
Those rabbit holes can get us sometimes. That definitely happens when you're
yeah,
writing, especially as a pantser. And I'm a total pantser, but I can see sci-fi being difficult to write to be a pantser. I would say myself. It just seems like you're creating worlds and races, and you know, some of the name, you've got to have some names. You can't usually just use John and Mary as names, because it doesn't really work in sci-fi. So you've got to come up with some uniqueness there. And I think sci-fi would be very difficult to pants a book, especially for a first book.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other problems was, I'm an engineer by training. And so I really love telling the technical details behind some of my ideas and some of the tech in the books. And it's like, you lost me about 8 acronyms ago or 10 pages ago. And do we really need to know the molecular composition of this stuff? Well,
Yeah.
okay, probably not. So I can get rid of that.
Unless you're Andy Weir, right? And Andy Weir, which we're not related, is a Martian and stuff. He can get pretty technical sometimes, and he has some technical. He tries to get the tech correct as well in his
Yeah.
books. Though that's you got to fudge it a little bit to make it work with the story. But yeah, I'm sure that happens. So your first book, and we'll throw it up on here. So tell us a little bit about Spark and what it's about.
Okay. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, I have two daughters, and they were at the time I got the idea for this. They were playing a game called Pokemon Go, and
My wife and daughter still play that.
yeah, and I mean it's a fun game.
Yeah.
Um, Although they nearly killed it with an update, um, and so I always want to know what they're up to. You know, I now they're full grown adults and they can make their own decisions and stuff like that. But I still wanted to know what was going on, so I start playing this game. And I'm out walking my dogs one morning, and I'm playing Pokemon Go in the pre-dawn darkness, uh, and then this little Pokemon, this little Pidgey, pops up, and I realize that I'm seeing a virtual creature superimposed over a real background. And so I started thinking about that, and I thought, because I've tried VR games, and I still play VR games sometimes, but the problem with VR is that it cuts you off from the R. It's not real. So when you're playing virtual reality, you need to have some sort of safe space, because otherwise, you're going to step on your dog, you're going to hit your TV, knock it off the stand, because you don't know really what's going on around you. So I thought, oh, this blend, this augmented reality, if you would, is such a cool technology. What if you could build an entire Disney scale theme park around this technology? And so that gave me the core tech idea for the novel. And then, of course, you need to come up with the plot, the characters, and all that. And the protagonist, a young man named Will Kwan, is loosely based on a kid that my wife and I knew and tried to help earlier in his life. And he's got some real problems. His dad had died when he was fairly young, and then his mom died in his arms when he was 13, and kind of a rough life. And so some of the things that Will goes through in Spark are based on loosely on what this young man went through in real life. Uh, and so, because it's tech, because it's science fiction, I had to introduce a little future looking thing. So I've got AI in there, and uh, I had seen the series Westworld, and what I loved about Westworld was that 99.9% of the guests just see the surface, but there is so much going on behind and below the surface. And I thought, a real augmented reality park could be like that as well. There could be things that are hidden in plain sight that not everybody gets, that not everybody cares to pursue because it could be costly in time and money. And so Will turns out to be one of these people that loves peeling back the layers of the onion to figure out what's really going on. And along the way, he meets a young woman who is named Shakri Patel, named after my daughters Shannon and Christy. And she is an amalgam of them as well. And so it starts off with a little romance. At first, they're butting heads, and then they end up, by the end of the novel, they're holding hands, and it's a nice little young love aside to the or subplot to the whole book. But really, it's about AI. It's about technology that some people have that other people want, and they're willing to do anything to get it. And so that pulls these two young people into a high stakes, high risk game at the theme park itself.
So does this take place on Earth and sometime in the future, or is it present tense, or
Yeah, it's near future.
yeah?
Some of the things, like I talked about a place called um, Solar Prime, which is a solar power plant, and that too is loosely based on reality. When I was out at Edwards Air Force Base, there were a couple of solar power projects that were going on in the desert up around Barstow. Some of them have been shut down now, but they were all the reflecting kind, where they have an array of 10,000 mirrors focusing the light on one spot in the sky, um, which creates some pretty impressive heat.
Yeah.
Enough to melt some salts to power heat water to power turbines, and a lot of inefficiency there. Um, but that's how the solar power gets into the book as well.
And then this is book one. Is there going to be more books, or have there been more books in this series?
Yeah,
We didn't
yeah,
get
there's
a
actually four
copy
now.
of your copies, so there's been four so far. Okay.
Yep, yep. And I've paused writing of the series. I brought the By the end of the fourth book, the major story is complete. Now, there's a whole lot of offshoots that I may pursue one day, but I've pivoted to a few other projects. So, yeah, four books in the series: Spark, Fire, Orkland, and the last book in the series is called Embers.
And so that ends the series then, Embers, or do you think there might be some more? You say
Yeah,
you paused it, so
never say never, right?
that's
So,
right.
I mean, if if the four books take off, then that would provide maybe a little more financial incentive to write some additional books in that universe. But for now, I'm aiming at a different universe, a little more contemporary, and also for a different target demographic. Um, the Spark series is really for young adults, for the young at heart, and one of the things I've discovered is the number one demographic for readers is people who are older, people who have some gray in their hair, who grew up reading and didn't grow up with tablets and um, iPhones, and so they still like to read. And so I'm targeting that book for that demographic. Although I do think it's going to have appeal across generations as well.
So that's a question I usually ask: a book you want to write that you haven't written yet. Have you started writing this yet, or is this still something that's still kind of cooking in your head?
I've started writing it. I'm about 150 pages into it, and once again, I'm getting a little verbose, so I'm going to need to prune it down. But luckily, it doesn't really take me 8 drafts to get to a publishable manuscript anymore. Usually, I can knock it out in 4. So I'm getting better. Um, yeah. So so that's a story that has been bouncing around in my mind for a couple of years. And, I'd take a few notes and save those and then keep coming back to it when I was tired of working on the SPARK Chronicles. So yeah, I got that one going. Um, and then I've started a nonfiction business book that I'm working on with another guy who was CEO of a company that got hacked, and it's not so much about the hack, but about the recovery and how dangerous the hack could have been. So yeah, I got those two projects going on simultaneously, but I'm kind of shelving the sci-fi one in favor of the nonfiction until we get that one complete.
Was the hack a ransomware type of hack, or how?
Yep, absolutely, a ransomware hack shut down a big chunk of critical U.S. infrastructure, and could have been very, very bad, but they had to make some gutsy calls, not all of which were appreciated by those in power.
Yeah, I mean those ransomware attacks are nasty. It's amazing to me. I worked in security base and I did all that stuff, and how many holes there are in software. If you ever if you've ever worked in software and there's always patches, and I always reminds me of the finger in the dike, because I swear that's all it is they fix it, but then it just another one just pops up related to that fix, and that's all they're doing all the time, it seems like.
Yeah, and as things evolve, so do the hacking tools, and it's a, I guess it's good job security. If you're a software engineer, plugging all those holes, but it's frustrating for those of us that don't want to make our living exploiting weaknesses and stealing from others. So,
Yeah, one of my books, Dead Man Co. and I had a computer engineer that was murdered, and I talked about that too. Is sometimes how trusting we are with the things that we put on the internet, the typing in. We freely give away certain things sometimes, and now with AI, as an author, the lawsuit that's going on now, where they were Anthropic or whatever the company was, is that they're we're feeding books into AI to train it how to write, and it's scary sometimes. I think what's going on. I don't know if you've had any of your books get pirated or not from any of that stuff, but
yeah, not that I know of, not from AI, but I did see some stuff pop up where it was being sold in Africa, and I thought, well, that's kind of odd. That's not a huge market for English science fiction, but hey, and I certainly wasn't getting any royalties from it. So somewhere somebody had a printer going, or maybe they just stolen the ebook and were getting it out that way.
so you mentioned that you tried the pants and you decided to outline. So what about the new stuff, what you're working on? Is that pretty much outlined, or are you kind of in between? How
It's,
are you
it's
writing those books?
Yeah, it's a little in between. I write a much more detailed outline now that gets now I'm at 10 pages instead of one.
Wow.
And and one thing I learned was make sure you know how the story ends so that you can promise the story early on and then deliver what you promised on. One of the big problems I had early on in Spark is I don't know how this is ending. I'd keep writing and have a 300,000 word book and still not have it end. So I figured out in the subsequent books that I have to, like Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Um, Figure out where you're going, and then it makes it a whole lot easier to get there when you actually know your destination. But I still pants a fair amount because part writing also inspires. you get your brain thinking, thinking about what you want to write and what's going on with your characters, and ideas pop up. You go, ooh, and you start chasing those rabbits, and some of that makes it, some of it doesn't.
So, being a pantser, I've often feel like the characters are in the room with me when I'm writing sometimes, and sometimes they're whispering to me and they say, "I want a bigger part," or
Yeah,
"Don't kill me off. I want to keep going." Do you ever feel like sometimes that works with you as well?
absolutely, absolutely. It's like they take on their own voice, uh, and you write a line of dialogue or something for them, and it's almost as if they're saying, "I would never say that. That that's I would never use that word. I don't care if you're worried about echoes and repeating words in dialogue. People repeat words all the time. We all have our own favorite vocabulary that we use. Probably 80% of what we say is probably things that we say or words that we use routinely.
Yeah, that's hard. Sometimes it's hard in dialogue, to do that because people say, "Well, yeah, you're kind of repeating," but I think in dialogue, people say, like some people say, one of us said, "Well, you write a lot of short sentences," and I had that discussion with my beta readers. I says, "Well, we kind of talk that way sometimes, It's the way my brain works sometimes. I'm thinking in short segments sometimes, and I think people talk sometimes like that, and we're not blathering on. Occasionally we do, but yeah.
Yeah, I was years ago. I was involved in a project where the lead researcher was doing interviews, and then the interviews would be transcribed. And to go back and read the transcribed interviews was horrifying because, like you say, we don't speak generally in complete sentences, and when we're talking face to face, we rarely put a complete thought into a sentence because we're adding so much context, and it's like, well, that thing over there, and okay, in a book you can't just say, well, that thing over there, and point at something without explaining what it is you're pointing at. And yet in conversation we do it all the time with head nods and eye movement and stuff like that. So yeah, people do talk in short sentences. Not me apparently, but people in general.
Yeah, well, and I know my wife sometimes. My wife isn't a big fan of my books as well. It's not really the genre she reads, but she feels like I'm too detailed sometimes in what I write as well. Because again, that's the way my mind is. I've always been like that. Like when I worked in the business world, um, I'd go to my boss and they'd tell me, "Well, you need to do this," and I'd always have to ask, "Okay, then why? Why do I need to do it that way?" I always had to have that
Mhm.
detail to understand it if it didn't jump out at me and say, "Okay, yeah, I can understand why you're doing it that way." I always wanted to know that. And so sometimes I write that way and I have to kind of scale that back a little bit. So
Yep. Yep. Early on, I was pitching my book idea to my wife on a Friday afternoon. She was teaching fourth grade at the time, and Friday afternoon is her decompress time, but she's still in teacher mode. And so I'm pitching this to her, and she goes, "Okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about this?" And I might have reacted poorly um, because by the end of the meal, we were still married, still in love, and she had promised that she would never read a word of that book until it was published. So I lost a potential advocate and early reader early on by my own misbehavior. So
well,
time,
usually they say, yeah, you don't want to get feedback from your family, if wife, kids, relatives or stuff. Try to get something, outside that, because sometimes, yeah, that gets to be an issue. Whether they're too honest with you or they're not honest enough with you, right? So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because I'd rather have, when it comes to the writing stuff, I'd rather have a hard truth than somebody trying to save my feelings. Because if they're trying to save my feelings, the writing's not going to get any better.
Yeah. So, are you Are you an independent, self-published, or are you more traditionally published with your books?
Spark was first traditionally published, and then when the second book, Fire, was ready, uh, the publisher, it was a smaller press, and they had fallen on some financial difficulty, and the owner of the company was pushing one of their projects to the front. And I was told, well, it's going to be 2 years before we'll get your book published. I said, well, that didn't really work for me. I'm writing near future science fiction. I don't want the future to come rushing to catch up to me and pass me, and then I'm writing stuff that's not accurate anymore. So we went back and forth about it a bunch of times. I said, well, maybe, hey, here's an idea. Why don't I pay for the editor and you give me a bigger cut of book sales? Or I pay for the cover art and we can work something out. And they thought about it for a while and then came back and said, no, that's not traditional publishing. We want to be a traditional publishing house. And I said, okay, well, what's it going to cost me to get out of this contract? So I ended up uh, buying my book back from them. And that ended up being, for me, a godsend because I'd hated the cover. They weren't willing to spend more money to make it a cover that I liked. And so bought it back, published it as a second edition, and cleaned up some of the stuff. Okay, you work in IT, you will get this. One of the characters is an AI in the book. And so there's a lot of references to binary code, and I trotted out an old binary code joke, and I put that in one of the chapter headers. That there are 1, 0 kinds of people in the world: those that understand binary and those that don't. Okay, so we get it. However, the copy editor said, no, 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 our style guide says that we spell out word or numbers less than 20.
Right.
So suddenly the joke reads as there are 10 kinds of people in this world, those that understand binary and those that don't, which is not even close to humorous.
Yeah.
So I got to fix that. Uh, and I think I'm happier being independent.
And you found yourself a new cover artist, I'm assuming,
I
since you
did.
didn't like the cover.
Yeah, yeah. I actually 1 and 4 have the same cover artist, and 2 and 3 have the same cover artist. Because I went through 99 designs to find a cover artist for the first book, and loved their work, loved the cover, the way it turned out. They were great about taking suggestions and changing it. Uh, and and then when it came time for the second book, I could no longer find them. I couldn't find them on 99 Designs. I Googled the studio name, which was Jesh Art Studios. Uh, couldn't find them. And so I went over to Reedsy and I found a cover artist there. She did the covers for Fire and Orkland, and then I found Jesh again for book 4, only because the cover artist for Fire and Orkland had gone silent on me, and they were just either too busy or life. People change careers,
Yeah.
so I got Jesh back for book 4, and was happy with it.
Okay, so we're about 45 minutes in. So I always ask this question of everybody on the show. The name of the show is Bringing Life to Characters. So what is it you're looking for when you're creating your characters? What is it you feel like the magic sauce for you to get those characters to pop off the screen or pop screen, but the well, sometimes it's a screen if it's an ebook, I guess, but the paper or whatever, and people go, yeah, that's a character I like, or that's a character maybe I don't like, but sometimes we like those characters we don't like better than the ones we like sometimes. So
True, true. One of the bits of feedback I got in on the original book was that we know this guy is a really bad guy, but he's kind of a fun, really bad guy.
mhm. Yeah.
Uh, and I think one of the things that I didn't really grasp when I first started writing was the concept of agency. And a character has to act in a way that is consistent with who they are and what they're doing. Um, and if you're putting dialogue or actions on them that only serve the story but that are unrealistic for the character, you're going to end up with a flat character. And I think they could be the gray man, just just spouting lines of dialogue without any passion or love for it. Whereas real people put a lot of passion into the things they do.
So do you have a lot of characters in your book, and how do you keep track of all of them?
Uh, I when I made them up as I went along. Sometimes I modeled them after people. And in the first book, there's probably 6 or 8 characters that we follow and get to know routinely, and then there's the bit part actors that come on the scene, the scene, they serve the purpose, and then you never hear from them again, maybe until they have a bigger role in book 2 or book 3. Um, Complete change for me was when I started my my current project. Is I actually wrote the characters first, and I decided, there's 6 of them. I decided how I wanted them to interact, how they would help support the story because their background, and so I wrote physical descriptions and personal backstories for all of them before I even started page 1.
Yeah, that's sometimes you have to do that depending on how the story is. Get all that stuff ironed out, and then so when you start writing, you said you outline, but you're kind of a pantser. So are you real strict with staying with your outline, or does sometimes the story kind of change a little bit as you're writing?
Yeah, sometimes the story will change as I'm writing, and then I go and I edit my outline.
So then it looks like, oh, I followed the outline, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like I'm one of those people that if I make a to-do list and I do things that aren't on the list, I will write them on the list so I can cross them off, just so I have that satisfaction of, see, I did more than just 2 things today. I actually did 6 things. I had to add the last 4 at the end of the day just to catch up. But yeah, so it's a blend. It's a blend.
So are you talked about earlier about trying to be dedicated in writing? Are you good about that? Do you try to do something pretty much every day when it comes to whatever your work in progress, or do you sometimes kind of have to take a break once in a while?
Yeah, life always gets a vote. And I try not to write on Sundays. I'm trying to be better about Sunday being, hey, take the day for other things. Focus on your spiritual life, your family life. Uh, and then the other days, I will try to do my writing in the morning. I find that to be a more creative time for me. And um, I follow Neil Gaiman's advice on this. He says, when I sit down to write, the only thing I am allowed to do is write. He says, it's perfectly fine for me to do nothing while I'm sitting there, but I'm not allowed to do anything other than write. And so I generally set a word or a page count that I want to knock out in a day. And then after I get that done, um, I like to leave the day's writing mid-scene so that when I sit down the next day, I know where the scene is going already, and it's easier to pick up and go from there rather than, okay, well, that chapter's done. Now what am I going to do next? And then you spend a lot of time staring at the screen the next day. So,
That's interesting, yeah, because I'm kind of one of those. I feel like I got to get through the chapter. Not always. Sometimes I'll start a new chapter and it's like, okay, my brain is tired. I got to stop here, and then sometimes it's a matter of getting to sleep. I'll go lay down and that new chapter's already churning in my head, and I go, I can't sleep. Got to get up and write. But I don't know. That's interesting that you say that that's what you do. Do you have to go back and reread what you had read in that chapter if you're stopping in mid scene, or is it still locked in your head?
oh, I have to go back and reread.
Yeah.
But usually it's only a page or two, so that's not too difficult. Um, and yeah, like you, sometimes it's hard to turn off the idea machine when you're hitting the bed.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had just finished my first draft the other night, and I told my wife, said, I can't get to sleep tonight because every night before that, I'd been thinking about what was next, trying to finish that first draft. I didn't have that in my head anymore, and I couldn't get to sleep because I'd start thinking about it, and that would put me to sleep for whatever reason. Eventually, that's no uh, thing about how bad the story is. It puts me to sleep, but it was just that was just my comfort thing, and I didn't have it in my head anymore, and I couldn't get to sleep that night. I was like, doggone it. I guess I need to start thinking about the next book already, and then
Yeah.
I get to sleep. So that's what I started doing. So what advice? So you kind of got into this later in life. So what advice do you give to those people who are aspiring authors, want to get into this crazy game? You obviously you kind of you took your work back and tried to take control. Is that something that you see? It sounds like you were happy about that you did that. Some people don't want to do that, but tell us what good advice that you've learned along the way.
Okay. There's a saying that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So the best time to have started your writing career was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So start today, write fast, write bad, write wrong. And I know that little phrase is incorrect, but it makes the point. Get the story onto the page. Do it quickly, capture all the excitement of it the first time through, then go and correct your errors and do the polishing and the coloring. I tend to write action and dialogue, and then when I go back, I have to do in the second draft. I do more insert more scene descriptions and try to put more physicality into the story.
That's I mean I'm kind of the same way. Dialogue, a lot of times it's just like the dialogue, but then you've got to break that dialogue up a little bit with some action and stuff. But that's hard to do when you're writing dialogue because you're kind of popping it out in your brain just as you're going, and it's like you can't always really stop and say, okay, well he's nodding his head, or he's taking a drink, or he's scratching himself or whatever.
Yeah, and the and I get really sloppy in the first draft on dialogue tags, and then I have to go back, and now I've got 2 pages of dialogue, and I have to go, okay, who was talking here?
Right, yeah.
Sure. I put those dialogue tags in so at least I know. And even if it's just he said, she said, he said, she said, that's fine. You can fix that later on, but make it easier for yourself the first pass through.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell whose voice is who's on a static piece of paper, or on the static binary on your computer, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what marketing advice would you give anyone when it comes to wanting to get in, especially being independent? You got to pretty much do it all yourself. Marketing, editing, covers, all that stuff. So,
Um, book fairs are gold. Um, if if They are well advertised and well attended. There's
There's a
one
lot
that
of bad ones out there. A lot of good ones too. But there's a lot of bad ones.
yeah, a lot of bad ones. And I would say at the last book fair I was at, a gentleman came by and he said, "Would you would you think about selling your books in a grocery store?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. You know, if they'll put my books on the shelf, I'm more than happy for Kroger or Randall's or somebody to sell my book." He goes, "No, no, no. I'm not talking about shelf space. They're not going to shelve your book. But we'll give you a little table in the
Right.
grocery store." Like, no, I'm not willing to do that. And there, your time has value. And if you're chasing every possible marketing opportunity, then you're going to waste a lot of it. Um, I had hired a publicist once upon a time who set me up for a book signing in a pharmacy, and I thought, okay, I was willing to do it, and then my wife came along with me, and we pull up to this pharmacy, and it's in the hood in Houston. It's one of these places where there are bars
Right.
front of the in front of all the glass, and to get into the pharmacy you have to hit the buzzer and they have to buzz you in. So there's not going to be any spurious foot traffic who's going to come in and go, "Oh yeah, I want to meet this author." So yeah, be willing to say no on some of these marketing opportunities. um, there are there's difference between marketing and publicity, I think. um, and good publicists are hard to find. I've been very happy with Mickey Mickelson at Creative Edge. Um, Marketing is a little tougher, but marketing, again, back to book fairs, a lot of independent bookstore owners haunt book fairs, and then you can make a connection there, and then they'll start carrying your books, actually putting them on the shelves. So, so that's all very good. Um, it would be nice to have a billboard in Times Square. Can't afford that.
Do you ever have you ever done any Comic Cons? You know, sci-fi usually does very well at Comic Cons. So.
I I did Comic Palooza in Houston for a number of years, and over time, well, first of all, the guy that owned it sold it, um, and when with that sale came a pivot in philosophy, and they became far more focused on celebrity appearances,
Right.
and so people were overwhelmingly coming because they wanted to see, or get an autograph from, you know, Andy Weir, or Brandon Sanderson or William Shatner or somebody like that. They weren't so much interested in stopping by your booth to to talk to you, and it's comic palooza. Comic stalls do well, as do little collectible figurines, Baby Yodas and stuff like that.
Right.
They do very well. But authors, at least my experience, the past couple of years were not that great. So this is the first time in a long time that I've elected to not do Comic Palooza. And I got into one in LA, but I was not going to do that unless I got a panel or some sort of speaking engagement, because and I did not get a panel, so I'm backing out of that one as well.
Well, they can be pretty expensive too.
Yeah.
Comic Cons as well. So, but yeah, it's if you can find one. Um, Unfortunately, Pat Daly is not a big enough celebrity to
That's right.
get your name on the marquee, huh?
Yep. Yep.
All right. So, we're right at an hour, so we'll wrap up here. So, do you have any events coming up that you are going to be doing? And I'm going to throw up your website here for people, and you can tell them a little bit about your website and the best way to get a hold of you, where your books are at, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You can find all that through the website, thepatdaily.com. Not because I'm a super egomaniac, but somebody was squatting on patdaily.com.
I know.
And so I don't know, slap a the in front of it. And, now I might have used an alternate domain name, but hey, .com is still the king of
Yeah.
the domains. And so I'm happy with that. Yeah, links to all the books are there. I also blog there, and usually my blog I push out stuff to social media. I'm Pat Daily author on Facebook. I'm Pat Daily Pics, Pics, on Instagram, and then I'm at Pat Daily author on X. Although I don't really do anything on X anymore. It just,
It's all political now on X. It's
yeah, yeah,
Facebook's kind of becoming that way too, though there is some author stuff. But yeah, I
yeah.
don't.
And I just, I struggle with TikTok. I have just not done anything on TikTok, although I've got one author friend that gets a lot of success on TikTok. So,
Yeah, I haven't figured out the magic formula of TikTok either. So that's,
yeah,
I tried it for a little while and I was starting to get just a little bit, but it's one of those, it's an everyday thing. And sometimes it's multiple times a day you have to post things to keep relevant, especially on TikTok, because there's so much being posted all the time. So it's
yeah,
tough. And, as an author, you could spend your whole life. You were talking about sitting at the computer, and even if you did nothing, it's you need to be writing or do nothing, but don't do anything else, and that's the problem. You start getting onto social media, it takes away from the writing too much as well, and then you do not get any writing done. You start reading all these posts, and it's like I mean, you got to cut out some time, but you can't. I can't do it all day. Now you could pay somebody to do that for you, probably, but then that more money.
yeah. And then I think also you lose your voice. Um,
Yeah,
and my very first publicist wanted me to post 6 times per day,
right.
and that's almost a full time job for me. I mean, I'm supposed to be a writer. I can't just put out things that look illiterate on my post. So I got to take some time to think about it. And is this a good sentence? And then it's just, well, so I'll take fewer, better posts. But yeah, my next event is coming up in October. It's Houston Independent Authors Book Fair, and that'll be coming up on the website and on the socials as well.
Well, and I don't know if you do, but I do very well at holiday craft fairs. I don't know if you've ever done any of that, if you have a lot of those in your area there in Houston, but a lot of times you're about the only author, maybe one or two authors, and I've had some of those events where I'll do close to 100 books sold. So
Okay, good.
if
Yeah.
I would suggest that's a good way. High schools a lot of times will do holiday craft fairs, and it's a good way to introduce yourself to other people, and you'll be surprised. People will walk up and they'll go, "Wow, you're an author? They have an author here." They're kind of like they don't expect it sometimes.
Mhm.
And then you get repeats. So, but those are always good events to do around the holiday, and generally they don't cost that much either. So,
Yeah, I'll give that a shot.
yeah. Okay, we'll start to wrap up here. Or is there anything else we needed to discuss that we missed that you wanted to throw out there to people?
One last thing, and it's a plea.
Yeah.
If you buy the book, if you read the book, leave a review.
Yeah.
Even if you say the book stinks and that, I should burn my keyboard and never write another word, leave a review because the algorithm is driven by reviews. And so, even the bad ones are helpful because, I mean, not even J.K. Rowling has all 5-star reviews. And if somebody's got all 5-star reviews, to me, that just means they're still in the mommy zone. It's only their mom and family and friends that are leaving them reviews. So you got to have a few of those lower star reviews, but please help out, especially us independent authors, by reviewing our stuff.
Well, and a lot of people don't know it doesn't have to be like 3 paragraphs or anything. I mean, just a couple of short sentences is just as effective as a long review is. It doesn't take a lot of time. Of course, Amazon is kind of a pain because they force people, you have to spend so much before they'll let you post reviews. And if they think you have a connection to the author, then they sometimes won't allow I've had some of my reviewers get kicked off of Amazon because they posted reviews and they're like, nope, we're not going to let you post anymore for whatever reason. But yeah, it's a big thing and very helpful, and especially for independents, because those big companies, the big publishing houses, book comes out and they got 10,000 reviews like in a couple days. It's like, where did all those come from?
Yeah. Those can't all be all advanced reader copies,
They
right?
can't be all.
Yeah.
It's like, are the people employees of the publishing company posting the reviews? I don't know. It kind of aggravates me sometimes, and of course, then that pushes us down
Yeah.
because they get priority because obviously they get big money. So,
Yep. Yep.
well, good advice. Well, Pat, thank you so much. Thanks for hanging in today while I was struggling with my computer, thanks to Google Chrome. And it was great talking with you, and maybe along the way somewhere we'll run into each other. We're different parts of the world, but not
Yeah.
too
Sounds
far.
good.
I don't get to Texas very often, but
Well, we
hoping
are.
to do more travel.
We're coming to Colorado in July.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, we'll be in Des Moines the first part. First week. That's my hometown. I'm doing a car show there. I do
Oh,
car shows, and I actually do pretty good. My private eye, and I actually have my private eye drives a '69 Mustang, so I have a '69 Mustang model on my table to draw people over. So,
very good.
yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
Well,
So,
Randy, hey, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
well, I appreciate you being on as well, and we will chat with you later. And good luck with the next set of books, and hopefully the you get some of those older fans now looking
There
for
you
great
go.
daily books.
Yeah. All
All right. Well, take
right.
care.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We will wrap things up here. My next guest will be next Monday at 5:11. If I get my computer issues straightened out. Joel McKay will be my guest, and it'll be 6 p.m. Mountain Time as well. And be sure you're checking out all the shows. All my shows now are on all the streaming services. It's on Spotify, YouTube, always iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts. I mean, they're all out there. And this is episode, I think, 68. So a whole lot of them with a lot of great authors. Some you know, some you don't know, but some you might enjoy. Find out their books and maybe want to pick one up. So take care, everyone, and we will see you next week.